Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris in cooperation with Pioneer Public Television. Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.
For many years, Tom and I lived in an area where Juneberries are native plants. Sometimes we would find a patch and pick enough to bake a pie. I can still taste that warm, fresh pie with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. If your mouth is watering by now too, join us on Prairie Yard and Garden as we visit with a research scientist who is trying to give all of us the chance to grow Juneberries and other fruits in our gardens. This past spring, I attended numerous gardening events and wonderful educational seminars. One of the topics that always seemed to draw lots of interest was growing unusual fruits in your garden. I'm Mary Holm, and today we are visiting with Kathy Wiederholt, who is growing and testing unusual fruits for the Northern Plains in her research near Carrington, North Dakota. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, thank you, Mary.
Tell me, how did the fruit research get started here at Carrington?
Well, we have to give that credit to our director, Blaine Schatz. He attended the very first grape growing and wine making meeting here in Carrington. That was in about 2005. And he found so many people interested in fruits and, something besides grapes. There's a lot of interest. So he suggested that we start this project, and he bought a few plants and he hired me, and then I kind of ran away with the project that following winter. Then we started with apples and plums, Juneberries, and some of the grapes. And then I researched all winter and looked at things growing in Canada, things that are really popular in northern areas of, say, Europe and other places maybe in the US. And then we got in all these plants, and now we have about 14 kinds of fruit and about 750 plants. I started in 2006, and so now it's 10 years. It's incredible that it's 10 years.
Are you evaluating on the basis of the home market or commercial market or both?
In the beginning I thought we were doing it for the commercial market. We kind of thought this would be give people who are processing fruit more options, but that doesn't seem to be what they want. They seem to the processors seem to be more interested in fruit they already know about. So now we're kind of geared more toward the home growing market, and then those people are very interested in something new. They always want something unusual that they can try.
Are there other locations that you're trialing also, maybe other places that have a different soil type or a different moisture type?
No. This project is just based here at the Carrington Research Center, and we are just funded through the center. We do have a grant, but mainly our funding has come through Carrington Research Extension Center.
What all are the fruits that you evaluate now, besides the apples and the more common ones?
Sure. We have hardy cherries from Canada. They're called dwarf hardy cherries. They're more of a shrub. They only get about 7 feet tall. Very nice for a home garden to be able to pick that. And then we also have some tree cherries. They also came out of Canada, And then we have black, red, and white currants. These are European currants, not so much the American currants that grow wild. They're the European currants. And we have our Juneberries, or Saskatoons. If you are from a little farther north, they're Saskatoons. They're really the same things, just different name for the same thing. Honeyberries, also known as Haskaps, and sometimes we can talk about that. We have Aronia, a few elderberries. We're getting more hazelnuts now. And then we also have the apples, plums, and grapes. Our varieties do come out of Canada though, and they're just selections from the wild that people have propagated over the years and have found to be very good.
What is the difference between honeyberries and Haskaps? I've heard both terms.
Yeah, I mean, the overarching term, I believe, is edible blue honeysuckle. They're in the honeysuckle family, and their genus is Lonicera, if anyone worries about that or thinks about that. But honeyberries were first coined, the name was first coined by Mr. Jim Gilbert from One Green World. He brought in Russian plants and he called them honeyberries. And then some Japanese plants were brought in, and the name that is closest to what they call them is Haskap. And Canada started using Haskap because they would like to market their berries to the Japanese market. We do have pure Japanese culture plants here. So we do call the ones with Japanese heritage Haskaps, and the ones with more Russian heritage we call honeyberry. But they're really very similar to each other.
Where do you obtain your plants from?
We just get them from the same sources that anyone else can get them from. We have gotten some plants perhaps through the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, but we just mainly get ones that are available to anyone here in the U.S.
When you're doing your evaluations, are you looking for hardiness, flavor, or what do you evaluate for?
We do evaluate for those things, hardiness and flavor, mainly to see if they grow well in North Dakota, and then are they going to be easy for someone to grow? Are you going to have to apply a lot of pesticide or not? But yeah, mainly just that winter hardiness. Do they produce fruit every year, or is it every other year? I mean, even if it produces every other year, at least you know, then that's what to expect. We pick all the fruit, we harvest it all by hand, and then we take it into the lab, we weigh it all, and we do berry weights, and then we freeze samples for the winter. And then in the winter we do further testing. We do testing for pH and Brix, which is the sugar content, and then acidity, what is the acidity level in the fruit.
How many of each variety do you plant?
We try to plant at least 4 plants of the same selection. So we have demonstration plants that are just four, and that's it. That's our demonstration. But then when we have a variety trial, which we have for grapes and which we have for currants, then we plant 4 of each in 4 different rows. So we have a total of 16 plants, and they're kind of randomly placed in those rows, so we can hopefully get good information on that.
How far apart do you plant the plants then? Does that depend on how big the species gets?
It really depends on how big the end growth of the plant is. Like the Juneberries are planted 4 feet apart. Cherries are planted 5 feet apart to give you room for harvesting those. And then our currants and Haskaps, honeyberries are all planted 4 feet apart.
Do you have any trouble with insects or disease or rabbits or deer here where fruit are? Because, I have trouble at my place, so.
We could talk about this forever.
Okay.
We do have a deer fence. We have an 8-foot deer exclusion fence around the orchard here, so that keeps out the main problem of the deer. We do have vole damage, right? Everybody gets voles or mice, the meadow mice that get in. They love cherries. So they love to eat the bark on cherries, so they're kind of a pain. And we can't really put a wire around them because they grow more as a shrub, and it would be difficult for me to work with that as I weed and take care of them and prune. We actually just use a rodent bait out there. We have it in a special container. It's staked down to the ground so no animal can run away with it, so that it's not unsafe for other animals. And that has really helped keep the rodents down around the cherry trees. Also, I cut the grass very short in the fall and pick up that grass, so there's not a lot of place they want to be. and that kind of helps. I have wild areas here, and they can be in that wild area, so I hope they go there and stay there and keep away here from the other plants. We do have insects now that have come in across the whole U.S. We have these spotted-winged Drosophila. We could have a whole program on this. It's pretty much all over the whole state. It kind of came around in 2012 is probably when we first noticed it, and then it's been spreading across the whole state. You know, no one is totally sure if it's surviving the winter here or blowing in on the wind. As the weather warms up and more fruit starts to ripen, they increase exponentially. Each female can lay 300 or more eggs, and then those eggs develop into adults in about 10 to 15 days, depending on the temperature. And all of those that become females can lay another 300 eggs. So every week you're getting more and more of these insects. And they're very light, and so they do blow in on the wind. So we can go from a very low population to a very high population. And we have had problems now in our cherries, in my home strawberries, my home raspberries. Even the Juneberries now have been affected, which is, I feel, unusual. They're very early. We are picking black currants now, and they're really affected by it. But mainly the cherries and strawberries and raspberries, those red fruits, really soft fruits, are affected by them. I would say that the honeyberries and haskaps are not very affected because they bloom so early and they ripen so early that there's not enough time for those fruit flies to get their numbers going.
You had mentioned that fruit fly. What do you use to spray to control them?
You know, there's several pesticides you can use. As homeowners, we have very limited options. They recommend like carbaryl and malathion, but those are kind of old chemistries that you probably don't really want to use as a homeowner. But we have pyrethroids, which are safer. They call it a soft chemistry. There's pyrethroids. And then there are spinosids or spinosids, also available for homeowners.
Are there any organic controls that you can think of?
Yeah, the organic control is very, very difficult. Really, the two pesticides that are available to organic people are pyrethrins and spinosids. And the pyrethrins are almost ineffective. And the spinosids, you know, you need to rotate your chemicals. You cannot use one thing more than twice in a row or you'll get resistance from the flies. So you don't have almost any choice as an organic grower. It's very, very difficult. Your best bet is to pick your fruit every day and just get that in the refrigerator to stop the progression of the egg into the worm, and just pick them every day and fridge them or freeze them.
I had noticed that you have some catmint out here. What's the purpose of that?
Yeah, the catmint, you know, I just brought it out here for the bees, just to make the bees happy. We didn't have a lot of other blooming plants at the time, and you know, these bloom from May until frost basically, and they are well loved by the bees, and then the butterflies in the fall. I love them. And so they're just here for the bees. And actually we've been promoting clovers and things here. I've been mowing less and less, and then the red clovers have kind of come on, and we have quite a crop of red clover in the orchard now.
I also noticed that there were some bags over the plants. What are those for?
We do have traps, and we have these bags on the plants, and they are from our graduate student at NDSU. Her name is Caitlin Kruger, and she is researching, like, do the spotted-winged Drosophila fruit flies, do they prefer some varieties over the other? And we have traps to trap the insects, and then the bags are excluding the insects. And then the goal is to take that fruit back to the laboratory and then see if the fruit flies prefer one variety over the other.
How do you harvest all of the fruits? I mean, do you hand pick all of these?
We hand pick all of this fruit. You know, it could be 1,500, 2,000 pounds of fruit a year. It's quite a bit. We have summer students who work here at the Research Center. Mostly they're high school students, some are college students. And they come with me and we pick all of this by hand. The easiest way is to lay down a sheet and then just pick onto that sheet, not thinking about where your hands are going, you know, just drop it. And then we get them inside and we maybe sort them if there's any sorting to be done. Some of the fruits we wash, some we don't, and then we get them in the freezer.
Would you be willing to show us some of the varieties close up, some of your favorite ones?
Sure. Well, Mary, this is Kamchatka. This is one of our Russian honeyberries, and it's a nice, beautiful plant. And if you see a little age on it, you know it's got some spots. Well, its life cycle is pretty much done already. It bloomed in April, and we picked the fruit in June. So it's already had its life for the year. But these are some of our favorite plants. They look very nice in the spring. Their leaves are kind of fuzzy. They're nice and thick, have quite a bit of fruit, and the birds like them. The birds like the fruit. If you want to plant something for the birds, definitely plant a honeyberry. But also the birds make nice little nests in the plants because they're so thick.
So do you cover these with netting to keep the birds off of them until you harvest?
We do. The birds have fooled me many times over the years because they pick the fruit when it's just starting to turn purple. You'll never see it because they pick it at 5 in the morning. But we do. We put up netting that goes over the top of the shrubs, and then it goes down to the ground to keep the birds out of the shrubs.
You mentioned that this bloomed in April. Was that early even for these plants?
No, April's pretty normal. April's pretty normal. These are zone 2 hardy plants, so they're very adapted to blooming in the cold. They say that the blossoms can survive 19 degrees Fahrenheit. And we have had some events. We've had actually a couple years ago 17 degrees, and blossoms did kind of die. These were blooming when we had the 17 degrees, and then there was like a 2-week period where they just kind of sat there with the same blossoms, and then blossoming seemed to start again after that.
Do you have problems with early blooming and then frosts? Because we can get frosts into May.
We can, and we had a frost or freeze last year with that snow. We had 2 inches of rain, 2 inches of snow, and then the freeze. And then last year we got almost no fruit on any of the plants except these Russian honeyberries, really. And then this year we had another freeze, although oddly it was a little colder at some period, and the plants were not as affected, so that has something to do with the stage of the plants.
What do you do with all the fruit that you harvest? I mean, you weigh it.
Yeah, we eat a little.
Okay.
But after we weigh it and freeze it, it goes into our freezers, and then we try to get people who've made a commitment to us to try this fruit and promote it, and hopefully make new products with it. We have contacted the North Dakota Pride of Dakota members in the past, and so we have a good number of users of the fruit, mainly jelly makers, some other like kuchen makers, and then we have several winemakers who take the fruit. Okay, Mary, these are our Canadian Juneberries, or Saskatoons as some people call them. Very big plant, pretty nice. They give us really nice fruit. Here's an example. So we finished picking around the 13th or 15th of July, and these are some of the last fruits I just found out here. The fruits are actually like double the size. They're about double the size when we actually are harvesting them. They're very nice and large and juicy. So these are just little remnants.
And I've had pies of these, and oh, they are to die for.
They're just so juicy and delicious, and the pie is the best thing you can do with a Juneberry.
And these are native plants to this region.
They are native to North Dakota, but these specifically came out of Canada. But Juneberries are just selections from the wild. They just choose a plant from the wild and then propagate it. There's no real breeding done with the plants, so you just got to find a good one and go with it.
Sometimes people will call these blueberries, but these can tolerate a different pH than blueberries. Is that correct?
Right. Blueberries are not something that you want to grow in our soils in North Dakota. Blueberries like a soil pH of 4.5 to 5, and our soil pH here is 7.5 to 8. So blueberries will be so unhappy, and they will probably die after a while. But these do great since they are native. This is a native plant. And they do quite well. I have to say that they also have a lot of diseases because we have native plants and native problems. They have some fungus problems. You can see these yellow leaves right here. That is a fungus. And then they have this brown patch here, and there's actually some insects on the back called lace bugs. There's good insects called lace wings, but these are called lace bugs, and they kind of feed on the back side of the leaf. So we do have a lot of things that can happen to a Juneberry, but you know, in the end, they're actually a pretty easy plant to grow.
And they're native to Minnesota too.
I think they would be native to Minnesota, probably more of the western and prairie side. There are tree forms of Juneberry that are native to more eastern part of the U.S.
If a homeowner plants some of these fruits or some of the others, for the first year, should they pick off the blossoms and let them get established, or can they go ahead and start using the fruit right away?
You know, I tend to want to have the roots grow before they think about producing fruit. And we did actually pick the blossoms off of these for several years. You know, the plants are kind of small the first few years, so you can easily pick the blossoms off. So I did that so that they could get a better root system. So that's always a good policy. Let your plant grow before it produces fruit.
Okay, well, this one I have personal experience with, and I recommend it to everybody out in our viewing audience. And then, is there one more that you would like to show us?
Oh, I think we should see the cherries, the Canadian cherries.
I have a question. My neighbor has a very large, tall shrub with small white flowers. I would really like to get one, but I don't know what it is. Can you help me?
You know, it's very likely the species right behind me, Hydrangea paniculata. There's two main species of hydrangeas. There's the ones that have the low mounded form with the big rounded clusters. A lot of times the cultivars are Annabelle or Hills of Snow, although there's many new ones. But the taller blooming hydrangeas that have the little more pointed flower clusters are the old variety was PG. But now the one that most nurseries are selling is Limelight, which is this one behind me. It just puts on a fantastic display. And it's really, some of the roses are blooming this time of year, Hopentilla, but no large shrub is putting on a display like this in August. And so it's really, this time of year, it's welcome to have these beautiful flowers. It could be a screen, it could block an unattractive view. It could be we don't have space here, but plant perennials or shorter shrubs in front of it. And a really valuable plant for the landscape. It's very likely a plant very like this one.
Ask the Arboretum Experts has been brought to you by the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chanhassen, dedicated to enriching lives through the appreciation and knowledge of plants.
Mary, these are the dwarf hardy cherries from Canada. They were bred in Saskatoon. They only get about this tall, which is about 7, 8, 9 feet tall. That's about as tall as they get, about that wide. And they grow as a shrub. They're really nice for a homeowner. You can pick them without a giant ladder. And they have very nice fruit. They make really good pies. They make good drinks if you're interested in that. Pretty good sized fruit. The one we're looking at right now is Carmine Jewel, and it was one of the first ones released. They're very dark fruit. And what's unusual about these Canadian cherries is that the fruit is red all the way through, kind of like a Bing cherry, which is a sweet cherry. But normal sour cherries are yellow in the center, while these are red all the way through, which means they have a lot more nutrients than a standard cherry that would have the yellow flesh.
And then how big do these get about as compared to our store-bought like Bing cherries? Are they quite a bit smaller?
Well, compared to the Bing cherries, these are smaller. These Carmine Jewels are maybe the size of the top of your thumb, but we have some plants down the way called Crimson Passion, and those plants produce fruit that's really the size of a quarter, I would say. They're very large, very nice. The pit's not really large, so you get a lot of fruit for your money.
Wow, these look like they would be really good ones to try.
You know, and even if you don't want the cherries, I think the birds will take them. But they are so nice, they're shiny, they're healthy, they have beautiful white blossoms in the spring, and then they have the cherry fruit in July.
What kind of future plans do you have here for the research station? Are you going to try more varieties or different kinds of fruits, or fill us in on what you have in mind?
Well, I think we've kind of tapped out the northern hardy varieties that are available today, but we have added some pear trees. We got some 6 varieties of pear trees, and then we have some hazelnuts. We have a few hazelnuts from some breeding in Canada, but we also have new hazelnuts that are being bred here in North Dakota. They're at River Bend Hazelnuts, and they've been bred here for about 20 years, and they're getting some really good selections with nice sized nuts, good production every year, hardy here. So I think hazelnuts might be in our future.
Could we see what they look like?
Oh, sure, let's go. Well, Mary, these are something that people can think about in the future. We have these hazelnuts here. We have a breeder here in North Dakota that's been breeding hazelnuts for about 20 years. He's kind of in the east side of the state, and we hope his nuts will be very successful. These are some different ones that we're standing by. They don't have as much nut production, but you can see some of the fruits on here, or nuts. And I have one in my hand. I'll give you. They're very pretty. They're very intricate and interesting. And when they are ripe, the nut actually just comes loose. When you can flick the nut and it loosens in the shell, then you know they're ripe. So you also know they're ripe when the squirrels take them.
How do we use these? Can we use them just as a regular nut?
It's just as a regular nut. We get hazelnuts in our Christmas mix, you know. And you can take these and you will dry them after you harvest them. It's right around Labor Day. And then you can keep them inside. If you keep them in their shell, they'll stay good for quite a long time. And once you crack them open, then you know they don't stay good quite as long, as most nuts don't, so you could freeze them. But the easiest way to crack them, I think, is 2 bricks. You set them down and you put the chippy side up and you just pop it. And then sometimes the shell will just pop right off and your nut is sitting right there on the other brick. It's pretty nice.
So do you have to let them dry before you try to take the nuts out?
You should dry them, yes. And you can actually, when you've determined that most of them are ready, you pick it all and that husk is on there, and then you dry them, and then the nut will just fall out of the husk if it's a good selection of plants. So yeah, you dry them and then you use them later.
This looks like it would be a really good plant, not just for people, but also for wildlife, too.
Well, I think so. I would guess maybe deer might eat them a little bit. I'm not sure. But for sure the squirrels would really love them, and I probably will have to battle them this year to get a few myself.
This has been so interesting. Thank you so much, Kathy, for opening the gates of the Research Center and letting us come and see your research on all the wonderful small fruits that our viewers can try in their gardens.
Well, I'm so glad you came, and I hope people do want to try these fruits. They're interesting, they're new, and they're really delicious and healthy, so a good choice for people in North Dakota and Minnesota.
Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.